Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. It's on how to make hiring and working with software developers less risky. And today I've got Adam Cogan, the Chief Architect at SSW.
Hello.
And I've also got Adam Stevenson, and he's on Skype. He's in our Brisbane office. So Adam, how are you going?
I'm really well, and welcome.
Actually, you're not in our Brisbane office, you're at home today, and you can see a shot of his living room there. But I asked Adam, the two Adams actually, to come on this webinar and to talk to you guys about how to lower the risk of software development, because they've had a lot of experience with working on a lot of projects over probably a 20-year span. So before we get started, Adam, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do here at SSW?
Sure. I am the Chief Architect here. I am also an MVP in TFS. I'm a Microsoft Regional Director as well, and I spend most of my time going to clients. I'm often a Scrum Master at different clients, or I'm just going there to do an audit of what they're currently doing or what they're proposing to do, and it's always on .NET or SharePoint or CRM or something on the Microsoft stack. Great.
And Adam Stevenson, just a really quick rundown of what you've been doing in SSW the last few years.
Yeah, I'm a solution architect at SSW, and I love building MVC apps in particular. But the part of the job I love most is going into teams and mentoring them and getting the feedback from them after I help them with Scrum, continuous delivery and testing.
Okay, thank you. So let's get into the topic. And before we start, actually, there's a chat below the window there. Whether you're on the SSW page or the justin.tv page, there's a chat section. So if you do want to chat, go to the SSW page that we sent you the link, and you can ask questions, and Raj will be here taking those questions and handing them through to us. So we'll try and answer some questions as we go through, but we're definitely going to have a Q&A at the end. So if you stay for there, you can ask as many questions as you like, and Adam Cogan and Adam Stevenson will answer them for you. So look guys, software development, Adam, it's pretty risky. You've seen a lot over the years. I think a lot of prospective clients of ours, when they start the project, it's their first project that they're doing, and they may have a misconception of the risks or the complexity of developing software. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, definitely software is not easy. It's hard work. That's why software projects fail. I often think a lot of the problems that I see happen in the beginning, and they've just been allowed to get off the beaten track. I always remember something that Frank Arrigo taught me, in my very, very early days, and we were talking about delegation. He says it's not about delegation, Adam. It's about delegation and follow-up. And that was before any of these Scrum, Lean, all these type of methodology existed. But yeah, I think that is a key thing.
That's good. That's good advice, and I think from what people get out of today, it really is about follow-up and communication. So let's get into it. Let's picture this. I'm a prospective client, and for the first time, I'm going to be doing a software development project, or even may even be my second project. Adam Stevenson, what advice would you give me? What questions would you recommend that I ask my potential software developers before starting the project? So we know that there's the normal ones: how much do you charge, and what projects have you done, and have you used this technology before? But what are the deeper questions that can really reveal if these people are going to be successful? Maybe
so you're assuming. So I'm a client asking a consulting company like us.
Yes. So I'm the client. What would you recommend that I should ask a client, a prospective software developer?
So I might take this, Steve-O. The first thing I'd ask is what development methodology they're going to do. Not because I really care, it's not the be-all and end-all. You can ship software with many different methodologies. I just want to know, are they going to do waterfall? Are they going to do Scrum? Are they going to do Lean or Kanban? I'd want to know that up front. Yes, the specs and what we're going to deliver is very important. I'd want to know the framework of how they're going to do that, because it communicates a lot. And the other thing I probably would ask first is, what tools are we going to use? Are we going to use TFS? In most of the cases, our clients choose TFS. But then, how are the testers going to be testing? Are they going to be using Test Manager, or you don't care? Or are we going? Maybe Test Manager is just assumed. And are we going to go further? We're going to be using Lab Manager, that style. I would want it, because that kind of tells you what level how mature that client is in the SDLC process.
Okay. And why is that important? Why is the testing solution important from your perspective?
Well, I assume that my answer is probably going to be very similar to what Steve-O will tell you, but the testing is, it's very expensive. It's very quick to get software up and running, but often there's a lot of effort put on software getting to 95% done, but they don't realise that last 5% often costs more than the original 95%. So if they're today, you want to hear answers like they're happy to be using Test Manager 2012, and they understand why, or they're happy to do that because they trust your judgment.
Yep. Okay, great. Adam Stevenson, what would you recommend?
Look, the first thing that I'd want to know is, or one of the first things I'd want to know is, how often do you deliver the software to the customer? So when's the first time I'm going to get my hands on the software, and then after that, how often am I going to be able to inspect what you've done and actually get my hands on it, regularly? So, and then the other thing I want to know is how do you really ensure quality? So what tests are you doing and what testing, so similar to what Adam was saying, what tests are you doing and what testing tools do you use? And how do you ensure really high quality software?
Okay, so that first one, how often are you going to see the results of what they're developing? Why is that important to you?
I want to get, I want the software to, I want to make sure that I'm giving feedback I can give feedback to the consultants really regularly. So I actually want to, make requests and be able to change my mind and get my hands onto the software, and then after I've used it, have a new idea and then give feedback, and then have that feedback implemented, and then have it, straight back in my hands again, so I can, come up with more ideas and also test it and make sure that it is what I'm after. And it builds a high level of confidence. The other side of it is that if you're doing continuous deployment, you want to make sure that deployment process is easy.
Okay, great. So, Adam, what do you think is the best project management methodology for developers to use to ensure that software development is really lowers the risk of software development?
Well, rather than give you a quick answer, I'll just explain to you some of the problems that I've seen over the years that typically lead you to where I'm at. Okay, because I'm not that. I have a couple of favourites, but it's not the end of the world. What I don't want is to incur the pain that we've had. And in the old, what we learn at university and what we've done for a lot of projects is we've done waterfall. Waterfall is it's the default choice by a lot of companies. It's big design up front. It's like building a house. You get all the architecture plans done. You get all the fittings worked out for the bathroom. There's a lot of detail. So it's big design up front. You spend a lot of time gathering requirements, speaking to people, writing a thick document. And the idea is if you do a lot of planning up front, then the software process should go fairly smooth. If we plan up front, then the software process is a more known thing because they'll know what they're doing. They don't waste time doing things. The problem is the level of expectation that's set is that we've captured almost everything, which means we've missed a few things. There's also things that you go through and you start, you actually, I can actually just refer you to a client just recently where they spent a lot of time in those initial meetings where they wanted to talk about things that later on was functionality that was never even developed. And one was the authentication. So they wanted special authentication methods, and it was really important. In the end, when down the line, once we got going, they got to that point and they said, look, our competitor is being quite successful with the Facebook login. No one likes what we're going to do. They just want a very simple Facebook authentication model. And so then you had the, with the new MVC 4, it's a matter of just commenting out a few lines of code. All that investment and just, and in our case it wasn't that much investment, but there was a lot of reading done on which way we were going to do it and explaining and meetings and stuff like that. So, that's a good example. And so The smaller upfront planning and the regular, releasing and the working together as a team makes me lean towards. I like Scrum.
Okay. And so how does Scrum differ from the waterfall approach in a bit more detail? So waterfall is upfront, you do a lot of planning, and then you just hope that everything goes well and everything stays consistent. Where Scrum?
Well, I'll explain that a different way. So so waterfall, you get a very good foundation and you work out everything that's required. Think of that as the slab of your property, and then you put very good foundations on, and then you can build as many levels as you want. It's not really a very good analogy, but in software, what we try to do, and developers do the same thing in waterfall, is they spend some sprints on iterations on all the tables, and working out every single field that may be needed, because we're not coming back to that, and then we'll deliver, all the interfaces, and then we'll do the UI. They might do they might do a lot of upfront planning. Every single mock-up is developed. It doesn't matter which order. But with Scrum, we would do something which we refer to as emergent architecture. So emergent architecture is, all right, what do we need? Because we've got to deliver something of business value in the first sprint. So in 2 weeks, what can we get done? Well, we can only really get the customer form with 4 fields done. Are you serious? That's all you can do? Yes, that's all we can do. So we will aim to have something that's shipped, that has a form, that has 4 fields on it, it has a service layer, it has tables with just the customer table. Forget about the order table and the inventory table and all that other. Let's just get that going and check that's working.
Okay, great. So Scrum is obviously something that we're recommending and we implement here, and we think that that's a great way of lowering risk. We think that if a project is run that way, then there's a higher chance of it being successful. So what we'll do is we'll spend a lot of the next, half an hour or so explaining why it's going to lower the risk for a lot of clients. So Adam Stevenson, why don't you start to kick that off? How does Scrum lower the risk?
Did he say scum?
Look, there's quite a few ways that Scrum lowers the risk. It lets you eliminate bugs early and make sure that only the right functionality is built. It helps you remove dysfunctional behaviour and roadblocks as well. So probably the main one is the one that Adam's already raised, where we ensure that only the good functionality is built. So we're reducing risk because what we don't want to be doing is building something that, and it's really common when you're doing big design up front, to actually build something that the clients don't want. So you spend 2 years in development, you build this awesome application, you put it out into the marketplace, and then all the feedback goes, I don't like this, I don't like that, this would have been better if you'd have done it that way. With the emergent architecture that Adam Cogan was talking about, is you build the smallest releasable increment, and you actually put it out there in the real world, then you get feedback from it, and then based on that real feedback, you determine what's the next most important feature that you want to implement. So you're constantly getting in this feedback loop with the actual customer or customers, which mean that you end up building what the customers need, not what you think they need at the very beginning of the project. So that really removes that risk of building the wrong thing.
And I might just add one more thing onto what Adam said. You also, when you're doing Scrum, you're always designing for change, because you're expecting things to change all the time. When you're doing waterfall, you typically, this is our way of, this is what we're going to deliver, and you're not, basically when you get nearer to the end, you're really settling things down. You're trying not to have things change. If you include a lot of the good practices that Adam's alluding to in terms of the testing and the unit tests and that good code coverage, then you can have confidence to change software without without being frightened that you're fixing one thing and breaking another.
Which becomes a real issue as the project gets bigger, doesn't it?
That's correct. Yeah, the big systems are very frightening. If you if you don't have mocking over a lot of things that aren't your area.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get more into how some of the details. So Adam Cogan, how does Scrum help eliminate bugs? Because bugs are a big issue towards the end of most projects.
Yes.
Like you said, that last 5% can cost a huge amount of money. How does Scrum help with eliminating those bugs?
Well, I wouldn't say it's just Scrum that's doing that. It's a certain number of practices that you're doing. I think you've got, software gets really hard near the end, and when you've got when you're trying to deal with a lot of problems that are coming up, you need everybody working together. You need the devs working with the customer. Yep. You can't have this adversarial type of relationship where you're trying to, assign blame, and we've got to get stuff shipped. So if we want them shipped, then we need to have people working together. We need to have confidence that we can change things. We don't want dysfunctional behaviour.
And one of the things with the methodology is that the client works very closely with the developer to confirm that the features are bug-free. Is that right?
Well, if you're specifically, I'm not sure if you're talking about just bugs, or are we going to get this to a level of functionality that the customer's happy with?
Yep.
In that case, when we're trying to ship and we've got an impending deadline, or we're running out of money on a project, then the quality of the features gets sacrificed. Yep. In fixed price or waterfall, and we've got a ticking clock coming, quality can go out the window. We just put buttons there, we put stuff, and there's not enough time to test. It's just going to make it through. And you've seen big companies like Microsoft with great processes. They have a marketing deadline to fit, and they can release some garbage. Vista was a pretty good example. We've seen plenty of other examples. In Scrum, we have something called a definition of done. So a feature isn't done until it passes a series of gates, and that is it could be gates that we've called a senior over to look at it. It's whatever the team decides, but that quality bar of definition of done has been improving every single sprint, so that we've found and eliminated things, because everything we shipped was a practice run until the customer says go live.
Okay, great, good. And Adam Stevenson, how does Scrum ensure that good functionality is built?
So ensuring the good functionality is the one that I talked about earlier, where we're based on the feedback. We're initially releasing a small set of features, and then we're improving that as we go along. One of the other things that I think that Scrum does really well is it removes dysfunctional behaviour. So because we're the same way that when we're releasing, we're ensuring the right functionality is built by constantly inspecting and adapting. And that's one of the key principles in agile methodologies, is that we're ensuring the right product is built by just building a small amount of the product, releasing it to the customers, getting feedback, and then implementing those changes. We're doing a similar thing with improve and removing any dysfunctional behaviour. So because we're constantly inspecting and adapting, what we do is every day we have a daily Scrum meeting where all the team gets together, and we talk about what we're going to do today, what we did yesterday, and any roadblocks that and any problems that that have arisen that need to be addressed. And because we're doing that, we're constantly looking at what's stopping us and what problems. There's this gate where every day we're checking to make sure that we're going forward. So that helps remove dysfunctional behaviour, because we can address it at that point. And then at the end of every sprint, there's actually a meeting called the Retrospective, where we look at the process during the sprint, and we say, here's what was good in the process, and here's what we can improve in the process for the next sprint. And once again, that's great for looking at any behaviour that might be dysfunctional and saying, here's how we can improve what was going on in the last sprint. Here's how we can make it better in the next sprint. So I think that constantly inspecting and adapting really helps remove any dysfunctional behaviour that might be on teams.
So Steve, while you were talking, I just brought up our Rules to Better Scrum PDF, and the two that you just called out then was the Daily Scrum, which is up here, the 4A, and the Retrospective down here. So since you brought those up, I can't bring them up. So I'm going to bring up two others, and I'm going to say the sprint planning allows, make sure that the guys know that they're working on what is, the priority of the product owner. And what that does is, if we know that this is really important, this is the number one thing we've got to get done. Devs hit roadblocks all the time. And in a waterfall project, a roadblock can be missed for a long time, because usually you have milestones in a waterfall project which are usually a couple months apart, or at least a long time apart, and you can just start moving on to something else. But when you're having these daily scrums, which Adam talked about, and you know what is the top priority, then you have a scrum master who is eliminating roadblocks, and those roadblocks really burn a lot of time. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's great. So let's go through, let's spend a bit of time on this, because I think we've talked a lot about Scrum. Let's go through the detail, because this image here really lets everyone know the process to eliminate risk. And so who are the key players in a Scrum team? Okay,
I can tell you those. Essentially, the number one player is the product owner. The product owner is the customer. In most times, we call our customer our product owner. Okay. Some companies, the customers are usually sometimes really busy, and we solve that by, all right, we'll use a product owner in the company. Yep. Now, I don't allow that, because I believe that's putting the fox in charge of the chickens. Okay, and it's easy to. It's not. I don't think it's the ideal thing. I just look. Even if the customer's busy, I think it's really important that we have a product owner on board, because, as you know, most of our problems are with product owners. Yeah. A product owner that's too busy, or a product owner that doesn't have any authority, can't change a resource, can't make a decision. So
the key is they need to be able to make decisions.
Yeah,
or have access to the decisions.
There's no real rules about what makes a good product owner, but usually experience is the best. Yep. But if a product owner doesn't have any authority to make any, dollar choices, if they can't approve us buying a tool, or they can't approve us getting a designer for a day, or they can't change resourcing, they can't do anything.
Or change a feature set. It's required.
Yeah, and I understand sometimes a product owner is a proxy product owner, and there's really a bigger boss who, but that bigger boss doesn't have as much time. And if this product owner is connected, understands what are the pain points and what that guy's going to look for, then that's great, and he's got some authority.
Okay.
So essentially, just to run through this very quickly, we've pretty much covered a lot of this, but this backlog construction we talk about here was that big document. Now, in our case, backlog construction is usually what's developed in a couple of days or a week.
So instead of going out and creating a document that's 100, 200, 300 pages long that's detailed, we create something called a product backlog, which is a list of.
It's pretty much the same thing with with quite a bit less detail, but it's in priority order, and not only it has more detail in other areas. So not just do this, but what will the customer consider is done, and that is called acceptance criteria. Okay. So a dev knows when that feature is complete.
Okay. Okay, great.
And then you go through and you do the real work, which is a sprint, and that's usually all a dev thinks about. And then we have the review, where they've got to show and tell. Okay. Show and explain what they've done. The customer often has been testing it as it's going, so it's a bit of a recap. Hopefully, each one of those sprints starts going into production after a few sprints. And it's in production, there's business value there. And they look forward to their new version every 2 weeks.
So every 2 weeks in the sprint review, we give them functionality that works. They get to test it, use it, and they know that their investment they've made has now been justified, and it's not going to be wasted.
And then we get to the point where Steve just talked about what went well, what didn't go well, what can we do to remove. There's always dysfunctional behaviour with, just devs working together, let alone devs and customers and pressure. So what was the biggest one that we agree was bad? How do we try to remove that? Let's talk. Scrum's just a fancy way of communicating.
Yeah. So, Adam Stevenson, why don't you just give a bit of your experience on how well the retrospective has gone for some projects you've on. I'm sure you've got some examples of how the retro really helped the project move forward because there was communication between the developers and the product owner or the business that employed the team.
Yeah, the retro always on the retro improves the process on every project. So even in teams that are doing Scrum well, there's always room for improvement. So I think the classic example of the retro is that we went into a team that wasn't doing Scrum at all, and this was a team that they were doing VB.net, they were doing, they were doing web forms, they weren't doing any Scrum, and we went in there and we implemented continuous deployment, MVC, they changed to C#, and we introduced Scrum. And you don't want to overwhelm a team. So, what we do is we gradually introduce change. So, you say, well, here are the core changes that we want to make, and we make a few small changes. Then just every sprint in the retrospective, we look at the process and we say, let's improve the process a little bit. So rather than making huge changes, we can just make, incremental changes as we go along. And then what's great is that even then in really advanced teams, you're doing the same and you're saying, well, how can we, really improve our process? And, some of those advanced teams will have, continuous deployment to multiple environments and tests running on all of those. But there's still areas that they can improve. So it's great to be constantly looking at the process and looking at what's the changes to the process that we can make that's going to make the most difference to our project.
Great. And the room for improvement is not just on our side. We're expecting the client to become better at every sprint as well.
That's great.
What I've noticed is that as a team, at the beginning, no one really knows each other. No one knows how well they work together. No one understands the idiosyncrasies of personalities. But at every retro, you become more alike. As you say, could you improve that part? You didn't call me back. Maybe next sprint, can you call us back? And by the end of a few sprints, it becomes a well-oiled machine of the team working as a unit.
Yeah. And there's something else I might bring up because it's kind of interesting. But we were on a project recently where there was a lovely lady who was running the project, and even she found the retros, she didn't tell us this, but she found them confronting. Yeah. And so that, even though you're not on the project, you're just you do the initial sales and then you just touch base with her every now and then. You're prompting to ask her off the record, how are things going and that type of things. And then your first comment to her that you told me was, why didn't you bring this up in the retro? Yeah. She goes, I found it a bit confronting. And so then we helped her bring them up. Yes. So it felt like we needed to give some coaching to bring up some of these things that she didn't feel was very natural in a large company. Yeah. And it made a big difference, didn't it? It was great. And get it out in the air, let's talk, let's communicate. I think for me, from an outsider looking in, probably the single best thing about this process is the communication in that retro, how it gets the client speaking. Because even in the sales process, we have to communicate with the client, and we try to get to know them, but you don't get a great chance. But in the Scrum process, you become very, you really begin to understand how the client works, and as a team, you can really hit those goals that you set once you start communicating.
It really gets you on the same page.
Yeah. Oh, great. Okay, so look, we've talked a lot about Scrum, and look, I think people who are listening now can get a pretty good understanding that we think that the way you lower risk in a software development project is to use the Scrum process, because it encourages communication, it encourages accountability, transparency, so everyone is on the same page and nothing's hidden like sometimes it can be. What I want to cover now, though, is something that always comes up with a prospective client or someone looking at using a software developer, and that is, do you go fixed price or do you go time and materials? And I would think that a lot of people would assume that fixed price lowers the risk of software development and time and materials increases the risk. And so you guys have had lots of experience. We do both. We have worked with clients in different ways. Can you guys give us your experience on the pros and the cons? So let's start with the pros of fixed price. Adam, do you want to?
Well, the pro is that you get one price and you know what that price is. The cons aren't
Oh, before you go to cons,
Right.
Adam Stevenson, do you have any pros of fixed price? We're talking client and we're talking for the developers here, not just one side.
Probably the pro is that in organisations that have a very fixed budget approval structure, that they can get projects approved. So, because that's if there is a pro, that's probably the situation where some businesses see it as a pro is, well, I can get this project approved if there's a fixed dollar price. I can't get it approved if there's not.
Okay, so for the client, it kind of gives them...
But I disagree with that premise. I think there's better ways of doing it.
Yeah, so for the client, a lot of times it's understood that if I get a fixed price project, it's going to lower my risk when it comes to the financial outcome. Adam, what are some of the cons of fixed price? And then we'll move into time materials, the pros and cons of that. Well, what's some of the cons of fixed price from a client, but also from the developer's point of view?
Okay. I would say the worst thing about a fixed price is the adversarial relationship that is created. And I'll tell you, and usually that manifests itself in just small things, but small things over time are bad. So when you do, fixed price, you have set goalposts, and everyone understands set goalposts. Let's work to that. The devil's in the detail, obviously, and there's lots of things missed. And so when they say, oh, look, can you just add one button there, and I just want a button to disable those things, it's not much work. Of course we can do that, but we should do that when the other chunk of work is done. So first of all, they're going to have to wait now. Plus, they're going to have to communicate via a change request as a normal method. And something that is a matter of some hours, a change request itself is going to take an hour. And then there's discussion, and then you give it with a warranty as well. So that one small thing is just a couple of days, okay, a day or 2 days, whatever it is. But in an hourly base, it could have just been done. Put it on the next thing on the backlog if it was really important, and we did it straight away.
It's just completed.
Yeah. So look, the client's not going to be massively unhappy, but they're not going to be happy about. Why can't you just do it now? Versus, and of course you can just do it now. Sometimes you will wear a couple of those, but you can't. You set a precedent. You can't keep doing that because you've got a contract that you've signed that you've got to deliver, which you could be sued upon.
Yep.
So you keep these in a little pile to do at the end usually, and every time they ask for just one field over there, just that one field. Now we know that adding a field, change a table, schema change, middle layer change, there's probably a couple of tests that need changing and then some UI changes. That might take half a day to do that, but with fixed price you might say it's a day and a half. And when this keeps happening all the time, because you've got to factor in documentation and that's got to be checked and this and that, that keeps adding up until the point where the customer is frustrated, and the developer's frustrated too, because developers just want to do it. They just want good software shipped. That's what they're motivated by. Customer just wants good value shipped to them. So when you put all these things in the process that aren't really helping, then you have these situations where a relationship can erode over time. Now, it doesn't always happen, but it often happens where there's a lot of argy-bargy, and in the end, you're going to have to, if enough of these fights happen, you're going to have to go and the customer will have to go and get new developers. And those new developers are just like, getting a new wife. Comes with new problems, a new set of problems, And so then you've got to explain it all again. That costs the customer a lot of money. It also costs, a consulting company like us a lot of money, because we've lost a long-term relationship with the client. So that's why I always say it's better just to charge a bit less, have a client for a longer time, than go for the money-making venture of. Because a lot of companies will sting you in the change request. Why? Because they lost money on the fixed price part.
That's a really good point, Adam. And I guess with one of the things, and I guess we're talking about these things because normally consulting companies don't talk about these kind of issues. It's normally something that is behind closed doors. But the reason we talk about this is because we want a successful project. And like I said, we've done both, but we're trying to highlight the things that we've noticed that make a project more complicated, and fixed price does come with a lot of overhead that people don't understand, but when you go through the project, you get to see these change requests take a long time, whereas if you're using a Scrum methodology, more agile methodology, it does promote a relationship where you start working together as opposed to working towards contracts. And it also depends on the type of client and the type of consultant as well. If you've got a good relationship, it does go a bit better.
True.
So, Adam Stevenson, what are some of the benefits of time materials contracts?
Well, the benefits is that you
actually let's do the negative side of time materials contracts.
Look, similar to what Adam said, it's hard to make changes, which means it's hard to develop the product that the customer really needs. Just further on that change request, there's for me the situation that why making a small change can't be done on a fixed price contract is that change actually is really, when you're doing a fixed price contract, it's a huge amount of work to make a change request if we look at how it cascades through the whole project. So if someone says, look, in the customer, I just want to add a second email field, a good developer may not just whack another email field into the customer's table. They might think, well, if we're going to be storing multiple email fields, then that should be relational. But now that actually has consequences through a whole lot of different areas of the project, not just the customer form. So it might change the process that needs to happen in the sending emails in the notification area. You now need to let the customer choose what email address to use. So it's actually a real cascading set of changes. So really what the consultant needs to do if they're doing fixed prices, they need to say, well, we can either quote you on, permeating that change through the whole application, or what we might do is we might just, let's take all of the changes that you want to do, save them up at the end, and let's do the fixed price contract to completion, and then then we'll address all of your changes, then we'll just do all your changes in an extra sprint. Okay. And I think that's actually often a more successful way of dealing with fixed price. The drama is that it's less efficient for the customer because you're building what they initially asked for first, and then making a whole lot of changes later. Okay. So Adam, the benefits of time materials contracts, like to lower risk, how does that help lower the risk of producing software that meets the client's needs?
Well, I think I pretty much covered it, by talking about those other things. If you're working with the product backlog prioritized by the product owner, and you're developing each unit of work that is following the definition of done, so each time a developer does some functionality, it's set to a certain quality bar. That might be, a percentage of code coverage, like a percentage of unit tests. Then, as each one's done, it's tested by the tester, and then potentially it might get into automated testing. But that simple cycle is all you really need, and you just need a nice cadence of work that continues to get completed. So that's it.
And the value is that if you are using a time materials contract, you definitely want to be using Scrum, because at the end, or an agile process, because at the end of every 2 weeks, you're paying for something, but you're getting something in return, as opposed to paying and then not really knowing if the functionality is complete.
Well, I'll just call you out on one thing. I wouldn't say you definitely need to be using Scrum. Scrum is one way to skin the cat. There's other ways of skinning the cat, but it is a nice first step. I'd do Scrum well before I tried Kanban or something like that. Like it's the simplest, it's the most popular method. It's a good way, and most developers understand. They get it. There's one other thing I want to say, and it escapes me, so I'll move on.
Okay, you can bring it up. So let's wrap this up soon, and we're going to have some Q&A. So type your questions into the chat box, and Raj will hand them over to us. But give us a little case study, Adam Stevenson, just a very quick one, just on a client you've worked with. You've used this process, and the benefits, the cons, the pros, the experience. How did it end up? So I don't think you can give the client name, but you can definitely, describe the project.
Yeah. Let me think. There's a couple of examples I'll just probably touch on quickly. So one of them was a ticketing project for a very large organisation on one of the most highly trafficked Australian websites. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to take their existing site and recreate the functionality in a modern CMS with a great new look and feel. So we evaluated all the CMSs and we picked the Telerik CMS, Sitefinity. Now because they're a really large organisation, they had strict budget processes, they had to have a fixed price contract. So, and they also had to have fixed delivery dates because of when they wanted the project delivered. So what we had to do was we had to do a fixed price estimation and then build this site exactly to their specification. And we did the process that I mentioned earlier where any changes that they needed, because when it started off, there was there was actually functionality that they didn't need, so we left that functionality out. But then there was changes that they wanted to some of the functionality, but then that would have cascaded through a whole lot of different parts of the site. So the two options we were left with is doing a quote for them and doing a whole new estimation of the project for each time one of these changes came up, or else just leaving all of these changes to the very end of the project and then doing a separate fixed price contract just for the changes that they wanted. And that's what they ended up deciding was a better way to go. But the problem was that because they were going to just execute the original fixed price contract without the changes, they were paying to build a site and then afterwards to go back and make changes to that site. If it had been agile, we'd have been doing real Scrum where we're getting feedback and then making those changes without being constrained by the fixed price. Then they wouldn't have had the wastage of having to build something and then make changes and run it. What can be a better way there is of working is to have a fixed price variable scope project where what we do is that we say we're going to do a certain number of sprints. Then the product owner is in charge of prioritizing their backlog of what they want included in the project. And then they're free to make changes, but what they do is they say, well, if we make this change, that's going to take up some time. So some of our least prioritized features might drop off the end. So it's a really successful project, but it had to be done within the constraints of a fixed price contract.
Okay, great. Adam, any comments on that? You were involved in that project?
No, I was. No comments.
Okay. All right.
So I think that we're almost close to wrapping up. Before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you to Marlon. He kind of pushes these things. There's quite a bit of organisation. He's got to get Raj involved. He's got to do a lot of testing. He's got to get Adam Stevenson and myself from off-site from a client to kind of coordinate all this because he's so keen on just having these type of conversations to kind of to enlighten you, to fulfill a sales process, and hopefully everyone learns something and software projects are run better. So I just wanted to say thanks for forcing it to happen.
Thanks.
Definitely. Thanks, Marlon.
So let's move into the Q&A. So start typing your questions. Raj, are there any that have come in so far?
And before we do the questions, I just want to also tell everyone just to hang on because we're going to have a little bonus session here where we have a guy from Texas. His name's Chris Menegay. He's a well-known software owner. He owns a company over in Texas. He'll talk all about Visual Studio Ultimate, what value it offers, and he's used to dealing with a lot of large companies, so I'm sure the conversation will come with some interesting bits and pieces that we're not always exposed to here in Sydney.
Okay, great. And before we do go, Adam, I did want you to just explain a couple of things to everyone.
Yep.
And that is, if you guys do have any other questions, feel free to email me at marlon@ssw.com.au. I'd love to have a chat to you to, tell you more about our experience and hopefully help you guys out on your next software project. Adam, we do have a bit of an offer today, and that is, tell everyone how we might be able to help them if they have an existing project that might be going off the rails or they might need some help on. What's a very simple next step for us?
Well, I assume you want me to talk about software auditing.
Yes.
So this is a process where we go into a client, and it's a very small bite-sized chunk, and it's usually 1 day of time in terms of commitment from the customer, and then we go in, we will have a meeting with the customer, we'll look at the source code, we'll look at the architecture, we'll go through a whole series of different things to maybe talking to devs, finding out the problems. And if you look down the page, you'll see that it's often with the architecture and code review, but sometimes if they're starting a project, it's a spec review. If it could be just mentoring teams, or it could be a UI review. Okay. How we install the software, we give a lot of critiques and that type of stuff. And it's it's a couple of days.
Okay, great. So, Adam, thank you for spending the time. I think a lot of this information that we're trying to reveal today is pretty hard to find.
Okay.
You just can't find it on the internet, and we kind of opened up, the inside of SSW and tried to be very transparent. Adam Stevenson, thank you, all the way out there in Brisbane. Thank you for coming on. So, if you guys do have any questions, just send them to me at marlon@ssw.com.au. It's Marlon, MARLON, @ssw.com.au.